How can you take walks from this to this? If your dog can walk nicely on leash in low stimulation settings, but their training completely falls apart when you go out in the real world, this video will explain why and how to fix it. And no, it's not because your dog is stubborn, and it's not because treats don't work. Today I want to show you the closest thing that I know to a cheat code for leash training in the uncontrollable real world, and exactly how I use these 3 techniques to transform Gus's walks. Let's dive in. So this is a bit of a loaded statement, but I think that most people are accidentally leash training their dog incorrectly. And to make my point, I'm going to take you somewhere that I really don't like to go. My husband's garage shop. It's a disaster. Let's say that I bring you into this overwhelming space and I ask you to grab a specific item in a language that you don't understand. Even if I promised you the world's best donut for getting it right, how successful could you be? Probably not very. And not because you don't want the donut, but because the environment is too chaotic for you to be successful with your current skill set. Now imagine that instead, we're in an empty space with only one item. When I ask you to grab it, you can succeed because I've removed all of the wrong choices. As your skills improve, I can slowly add more items, more distractions, until eventually you could succeed even back in that cluttered garage. This is the same foundation for proper rewards-based leash training. Positive reinforcement just means that we reward the behavior that we want repeated, such as your dog walking with a loose leash. But here's the part that people often miss. For reinforcement to work, the dog has to be able to succeed in the first place. It's our job to structure leash training so that our dog actually can offer the behavior that we want, but most people accidentally start their dog at way too difficult of level. A situation like this is the equivalent of starting you in that cluttered garage. This is exactly why in my last video, I suggested that you always start leash training indoors. Think of this like starting your dog in that empty room. You're making the right choice, the easy choice. But this leads to an obvious question. What do you do when you actually have to walk your dog outside? If starting indoors is like starting with one item, and the real world is like this chaotic garage, how do you progress from one to the other? I live and train dogs in a large city, so I completely understand the struggle. Even if you choose training locations carefully, you obviously can't control cyclists, barking dogs, other animals, construction, traffic, any of it. If effective leash training requires setting our dogs up for success, how do we do that in a world that we can't control? If that question has ever crossed your mind, you're not alone. If we can't control the world, then how do we control our dog training? Management. This concept will transform your dog walks. Management is the closest thing that I know to a cheat code for bringing real life down to your dog's training level. There are 3 management techniques that I use with every single dog that I leash train, and in this video, I want to teach them to you. So, what's the difference between management and training? Let's pretend that we were working on Gus's window reactivity. How could we use both management and training to solve window barking? I define training as teaching a new desirable behavior. It answers the question of how do I want my dog to act in this situation. If you want your dog to calmly watch people outside of the window, then training is reinforcing that new way of acting. Yes! Management, on the other hand, is anything that prevents the rehearsal of the unwanted behavior. So in this case, it's anything that prevents window barking. This could include using window film to block their view or moving your furniture so that your dog can't see outside. If you need help with your dog's window reactivity, I'll link a video tutorial for that down below, but the important point that I'm trying to make is that management doesn't replace training, it amplifies it. By preventing the rehearsal of unwanted behaviors, then your structured training sessions become clearer, faster, and much more effective. Yes! I believe that management is often the missing piece for successful leash training. So let's make this practical rather than just theory. Meet my client Gus. His guardians had stopped taking him on walks because they were so overwhelming. He reacted to people, dogs, bikes, animals, basically everything, and he had 0 leash skills. Even in an unstimulating environment, he pulled constantly. After a few indoor training sessions to build foundational skills, it was time to take that training outside. Management is what made those outdoor sessions tailored and effective. So as we said, we can't control the real world, But we can use really well-rehearsed management techniques to keep our dog's experience in that real world at a level that they can actually handle. I want to share 3 management techniques that I believe will completely transform your dog walks. I suggest rehearsing them indoors like I did with Gus, and then using them out on walks in very specific ways. The first technique I call Kong Hand.
Okay, so for this one, I would use something super high value because you do, when you're in the real world, plan on using it to distract. All I say is Gus, Kong. And then as you walk along, simply feed out those treats really slowly to your dog to prevent them from noticing whatever it is that you don't want them to notice. Gus, Kong.
I use Kong Hand to lure the dog past things that they aren't ready for and would likely pull towards. This is a management skill that I bring out when the situation is just too hard for the dog's current level and we just need to get past it.
Good. We're past the distraction. Oh, one more left. Now we're past the distraction and he's good.
I do suggest using a cue word with this technique so that your dog doesn't think that they can always grab the treats that are in your hand.
This is actually harder to do in motion than it looks, so make sure that you do practice it at home so that you're really good at it on walks. Remember to use a really high rate of reinforcement because this is meant to be distracting.
Examples of this are using Kong Hand to lure Louie past a dead bird that I spotted on a walk, or here where I'm using Kong Hand to cross the road and get more distance from people that I knew Gus would react to. Kong Hand prevents pulling on leash and it buys you time and distance. Using management in a situation that currently makes you think, uh-oh, isn't failure, it's data. You already know deep down what those situations are, and I would love to hear yours in the comments. Is it other dogs, bikes, squirrels? Please let me know. I do read every single comment, so understanding what you're struggling with really helps me create more helpful resources for you. The second technique is the up-down pattern game from Leslie McDevitt, whose book I've linked below. Drop a treat on the ground, and then when your dog looks back up at you, mark and reward. Repeating this simple pattern of predictable reinforcement helps to reset overstimulation, and it encourages re-engagement with you. With dogs like Gus that tend to grab or steal food, I do like to say okay or yes as I drop the treat so that they know they are allowed to take that item. I also personally like to reward from my hand when they look back up at me to really reinforce that engagement. I typically use this game out on walks to either prevent or reverse overstimulation that might cause pulling on leash. For example, many dogs get overstimulated when they leave the home. 1 or 2 rounds of the up-down pattern game can get your dog to re-engage with you and adapt to the stimulation of the outdoors before you actually leave for the walk. I also use this pattern game on the walk anytime that I feel the dog is getting too stimulated and they just need a reset.
Gus! Yes! Good boy. So he's getting a little bit more stimulated than I want. So we are already going to stop here.
Think of it as giving your dog a 15-second break from the stimulation of the real world. If you're finding this video helpful, but you want to know how to fit management into a full step-by-step leash training program, I'd encourage you to check out my guide that's linked in the video description. It explains my entire leash training process step-by-step in text, photos, and linked video tutorials. I'll link that below, or you can comment leash training, and I'll send you the direct link to that and all of my other training programs. The third management technique that I use all of the time is an emergency U-turn. It lets you quickly turn your dog in the opposite direction without needing any leash tension. I use it to avoid situations that the dog isn't yet ready for, such as passing other people or dogs on the sidewalk, and to create the right amount of distance for successful training. Here's an easy way to teach your dog an emergency U-turn. Step 1 is a verbal cue and a treat lure. As you're walking along, say your dog's name to get their attention, and then cue with me while using treats to lure them in the opposite direction. Giving your dog at least 2 treats as you walk away helps to keep their focus on you instead of them looking to see why you turned. Repeat this at least 10 times. Step 2 is phase out the treat lure. This time, still cue your dog, but don't hold that treat lure right in front of their face as you turn.
3.
If you've done step 1 correctly, your dog should follow you as you turn. Reward them when they do. And an important training tip is that every time that you use this skill on a walk to genuinely avoid something, then do another round later on when there's nothing there. This ensures that your dog will continue to follow that cue without hesitation and without looking around to see why you turned. Now you might be thinking, aren't these just avoidance techniques? What if I actually want my dog to be able to handle everything in the real world? I do too. But proper training for all of the situations that might come up in the real world does take time.
Yes. Not sure if it'll show up on the camera, but we are being barked at right now, and he's doing good. Yes.
And until your dog is ready for that, then management helps keep situations manageable.
Good.
Think of it as protecting your training.
Good boy, Gussie.
My suggestion is that whenever you use management in a situation that you'd eventually like your dog to be able to handle, then make a mental note of that and add a structured version to your training plan for later. If you want neutrality when going past other dogs, you can train that. If you want your dog to stop chasing squirrels or bunnies, you can train that.
Leave it. Yes, good girl.
Management just lets you enjoy your walks now while you strategically build those skills for later in a way that doesn't overwhelm you or your dog. Management is not about avoiding the real world forever. It's about keeping the world at your dog's training level until they're ready for more. If you want to follow along with Gus's entire training journey, then hit subscribe and check out his full training playlist right here. Happy training! I'll see you in the next video.